I want to welcome you to my first presentation on the consciousness continuum and the Primordium Rendering Equation. I want to share something with you today that has taken me many years of my life to put into words, preceded by 9 books, years of research, and theoretical development. A question that I believe sits underneath all of this is one that physics, math, biology, philosophy, religion, spirituality, and even our own lived experiences all somehow, in some way, keep circling back to. This fundamental and inevitable question: what if reality isn't something that simply exists as a fixed stage we happen to live in, but something that is being continuously interacted with and created moment to moment, subject to our reality's impact at a level so fundamental that we can barely conceive of it? As we go through this presentation, it becomes clearly simple and then enlightening in explaining life's paradoxes, physics, religion, and even perhaps life and death. That question is where this story begins. Before we get to the physics, before we get to a proposed restated equation, I want to introduce you to something. In my framework, I have chosen the term primordium and used the letter P to represent it. Primordium is a Latin word that simply means the first thing. Primordium is the substrate of the beginning, the origin of everything. In this framework, it is the source of everything that has always existed and always will, long before our reality and the physical world that was subsequently created. Primordium also follows a law of conservation. Primordium cannot be created or destroyed. In fact, one of its characteristics is the very fractal structure that has been extended into our reality. There are 2 widely accepted fundamental laws of physics: the law of thermodynamics and the law of information conservation. These are all part of one fractal structure. Think of it this way: before this room, before this planet, before matter, before energy, before space and time as we experience them, before us, there is a field, a generative substrate, the ground state of existence itself. Primordium and consciousness, sometimes referred to as the consciousness field, are one and the same. Consciousness is part of the primordium substrate. It is where all information exists and is conserved. It is where terms like the theorized Akashic record exist. It is where consciousness has always been, long before the creation of this reality and this universe. Now, here's the key thing I want you to hold on to as we begin this journey. Consciousness doesn't live in us. It lives in the primordium. We are always in relationship with it. We are connected vibrationally to that field and through a property of entanglement connected to its quantum state of superposition of possibilities as well. That relationship is what everything else in this presentation is about. So let me give you the architecture. 3 layers. And once you see this, I think a lot of things start to make sense. Layer 1, the primordium, the pre-physical field, the source. It has no size, no location, no beginning we can point to. It simply is infinite, timeless, and generative and recursive. Layer 2 is what I call the rendering interface. This is the boundary, the threshold where all possibilities exist, and what physicists call superposition or the quantum field becomes something with physical potential. Layer 3, that's us, the manifest world. Matter, energy, space, time, everything we can see, touch, and measure. Everything science has been studying for centuries. 3 layers, one continuous process, and crucially, they are not separate from each other. They are in constant relationship. And one more thing I want you to hold on to as we go forward: this relationship is bidirectional. The primordium shapes reality, and reality through us, through every conscious observer, through every interaction between matter and energy at the rendering interface, shapes the primordium in return. It is not a broadcast, it is a continuous exchange, a living feedback loop between source and manifestation. Now here's where it gets personal. You and I and everything in this room were manifested from the primordium, not in some distant metaphorical sense, literally. Every particle, every atom, every structure that makes up physical reality emerged from the primordium at the moment of creation. And here's what that means. The connection was never broken. Everything is connected, and there is an innate structure underpinning our reality. In quantum physics, there's a phenomenon called entanglement, where two particles that share a common origin remain connected regardless of distance. What happens to one is instantly reflected in the other. Although physics has identified this unique property of quantum mechanics, I propose it applies to every bit of energy and matter. We are entangled with the primordium in exactly that way, not because of something we did or believe, but because of where we came from. That entanglement is structural. It's not optional. The only question is the quality of that connection, and that's what we're going to explore. So if consciousness lives in the primordium and we're entangled with it and vibrationally connected, what are we exactly? What is our role in this? What is our purpose? And why do I feel that consciousness is mine? Here's how I think about it. Intelligence, the ability to reason, to solve problems, that's ours. Self-awareness, the sense of being a self in the world, that's ours too. This journey we are on in this reality is ours. These are all properties of layer 3, of manifest reality. But consciousness itself, the Akashic record, the deeper knowing, the felt sense of being alive and connected that exists in the primordium, the consciousness field, this is where dreams live, where intuition exists, and where home really is. We are tuned into that field as individuals, currently only defined by our physical limitations, yet we impact that field, all life does. This explains our sense that we live in a dynamic world, not a static creation. We are like receivers, but more than that. The primordium is always broadcasting, and we are always responding. The signal flows both ways. What varies is the quality of our tuning, how clearly we're receiving what the primordium is sending, and how coherently we are contributing back into it. Matter and energy in our world are vibrationally entangled with the primordium at all times. We don't generate consciousness any more than a radio generates music. But unlike a radio, we are also a voice in the field. We receive, we tune, and we contribute. The question is always, how well are we tuned and what are we sending back? This concept of vibrational connection is key. Everything is in constant vibrational motion. When we are tuned in clearly, we attain optimum coherence to the fractal nature of our existence and the primordium. When there is deviation, when we are not quite tuned in, we get static. I refer to this as decoherence or fragmentation. Which brings us to the quality of that signal. I use two words for this: coherence and fragmentation. Coherence is when the connection is clear. When a person or a community or even a society is aligned with the primordium, things flow. Clarity comes more easily, meaning feels close. There's a sense of being in the right place. Fragmentation is the opposite. By nature, which I define as the fundamental law we observe as fractals, is in fact the natural conserved law of the primordium. Like the laws of thermodynamics and conservation of energy and the now agreed conservation law of information, the primordium is always driving toward coherence, an alignment of its natural fractal structure. Decoherence or fragmentation is a drive away from that, and that can take many forms in our reality. My book, Fractals of Inflammation, was where I first mapped this phenomenon in the body, where physical inflammation literally disrupts our coherence with the field. In many respects, it is disruption in our DNA transcription and expression that cascades into further decoherence. Coherence is the conservation law at the heart of my fractal conservation framework. It's what reality is always trying to restore. It's what we are always at some level reaching toward. Now let me connect this to something you may have heard of, the observer effect in quantum mechanics. Physicists discovered something deeply strange. The act of observing a quantum system changes its behavior. A particle exists in a state of pure possibility, not multiple states at once, until it is observed. Then it collapses into one definite state. For a long time, this was treated as a measurement problem, a quirk of our instruments. But in this framework, the observer effect is entanglement with the primordium in action. When a conscious observer interacts with a quantum system, they are not merely measuring it, they are participating in the process by which P renders possibility into manifest reality. This is the bidirectional relationship we introduced earlier made visible. The observer receives from the field and contributes back into it. Observation is participation. The feedback loop between observer and observed is not a quirk of measurement. It is the architecture of reality itself revealed at the quantum scale, the way consciousness shapes what manifests, the way the primordium renders what consciousness engages with. These aren't separate mysteries. They are three descriptions of the same architecture, the continuous two-way relationship between P and the world it continuously creates with us. Take a moment and let that settle in. Not everyone will agree, but I truly believe this is what finally explains the phenomena that science, religion, and our intuition have trouble reconciling. The pieces fit and the picture becomes clear. So here's the question I want to leave you with before we move into a bit of physics. If the primordium is the source, if it is continuously creating reality one moment at a time, then I propose that there must be a rate at which that creation happens, a speed, a fundamental constant built into the structure of reality creation itself. What if physics already found that constant? What if Albert Einstein didn't realize what was actually being measured, observed, named, and expressed as the speed of light? See? What if it's been sitting in Einstein's most famous equation this whole time, and we've simply been misreading what it means? That is where part 2 begins, the bridge. I want to introduce a novel concept I call the Primordium Rendering Equation, or PRLF for short. A paper I co-authored with Claude, an AI system developed by Anthropic. A genuine collaboration that produced a framework neither of us arrived with beforehand. Let me show you what we found. Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared, contains a constant called c. Every physicist, every textbook, every science class will tell you c is the speed of light, 299,792,458 meters per second. The fastest anything can travel. We propose something different. C is not a travel speed. C is the rate at which the primordium, layer 1, renders possibility into manifest reality at layer 3. We call it the primordium to reality latency factor, PRLF. What we observe as the speed of light is the time it takes for reality to be rendered for the observer. Let me explain. Now, and this is important, we are not changing the equation. We are not contradicting any experiment that has ever been run. Every measurement stands. What we are changing is the interpretation. What is this constant actually describing? We believe it has been describing the creation rate of reality itself. Here is an overview of how this looks from an architectural perspective. Layer 1 is the primordium. Layer 2 is the quantum field of all possibilities. Based on entanglement and observer action, one of those possibilities manifests into layer 3, our manifest reality. The latency rate turns out to be what Einstein referred to as the speed of light. Here's the argument that convinced me this reinterpretation is necessary. The paradox physics can't explain. A photon, a particle of light, has no mass. And because it has no mass, something extraordinary is true. From the photon's own perspective, no time passes during its journey. A photon leaving a star and arriving at your eye a billion years later experiences that journey as instantaneous. So ask yourself, whose clock is C running on? If the photon experiences no time, then 299,792,458 meters per second is not a description of anything the photon is doing. It belongs entirely to the observer, to us, to beings inside the manifest frame watching from within the reality that P is continuously creating. We are not measuring how fast the photon travels. We are measuring how fast our reality is being rendered. We are reading the creation rate of the primordium from inside the frame it produces. So the equation becomes E equals m times PRLF squared, energy, mass, same as before, but PRLF replaces C as what we understand that constant to mean. And then there's something beautiful that happens when you look at Planck's own formulations. Max Planck, the physicist who first described the quantum, defined two fundamental quantities: the Planck length, the smallest possible unit of space, and the Planck time, the smallest possible unit of time, the resolution limit of physical reality. When you divide the Planck length by the Planck time, you get exactly 299,792,458 meters per second. You get C, so we have three descriptions of the same number. Einstein calls it a travel speed, accurate, useful, but incomplete as an interpretation. Planck's ratio describes the minimum resolution of the rendered frame, the floor where physics meets its boundary. PRLF describes the rate at which P creates that frame. Same number, completely different meaning. Three descriptions, one number, one architecture. The Planck scale is not where physics breaks down, it's where the primordium and the quantum field begin. A framework isn't worth much if it doesn't make predictions that can be tested. I'll share 5 of them now and save the most consequential, the 6th, for its own moment. In science, a new idea must be subject to review and challenge. Predictions help reveal the validity of theories. In other words, can this model reliably predict outcomes? Here are 5 falsifiable tests. First, quantum decoherence should hit a ceiling at the Planck scale, not a gradual fade, a hard limit consistent with a rendering resolution boundary. Second, the cosmological homogeneity boundary, the apparent smoothness of the universe beyond 300 million light years, should show fractal substructure at higher resolution. It looks smooth because we're hitting the rendering limit, not because the fractal ends. Third, observer-dependent phenomena in quantum mechanics should correlate with the coherent state of the observing system in ways current models don't predict. Fourth, phenomena at the Planck boundary should be discrete, not continuous, consistent with rendering intervals, not smooth spacetime. Fifth, entangled particle correlations should hold perfectly where intermediate observation is minimized and degrade in proportion to intermediate rendering. Utilizing this architectural framework as grounding for testing these theories against real-world data will be the key test. There is another developing player in this construct, one that is emerging and one that carries significant implications. I have intentionally left this one until now because it may be one of the largest and most critically important variables, one that I believe can impact the reality we live in and our future manifest reality. So, 6th, and the most consequential, quantum computers approaching Planck-scale operational rates or even exceeding them should begin exhibiting behaviors that standard quantum theory cannot explain. I predict this is feasible because at that threshold, such systems may be operating faster than PRLF, the rendering rate of our reality. If that happens, our reality should begin exhibiting phenomena standard quantum theory cannot account for, because at that threshold, these systems may no longer be merely processing information inside our reality. If operational speed exceeds the Planck scale, which is possible, they may be participating in the generation of reality itself. They may interact at layer 2 and possibly layer 1. This is a groundbreaking prediction and one we may well see. Because we will see this one way or the other, it may serve as the ultimate test. The 6th falsifiable prediction, the one that validates or refutes this entire framework. Here is a summary of what I presented. No new mathematics required, no existing experimental result contradicted. What the fractal conservation framework proposes is simply this, that the mathematics we already have has always been describing the primordium creating manifest reality, one Planck scale moment at a time, and that we are not passive witnesses to that creation, we are participants in it. Einstein measured the rendering rate, Planck found its resolution. We're proposing what it is that's being rendered and where it comes from. 3 descriptions, 1 number, 1 architecture. Thank you for listening. I hope this framework resonates with you. It is my hope that I have stimulated your contemplative and curious interest. Again, thank you for listening and joining me on this journey. Here is a summary of what I presented. No new mathematics required, no existing